Good morning, everyone. So I see a lot of you just came in the last few minutes. I know you were hoping to skip the part where I do the introduction, but you failed. We tricked you. Thank you very much for coming on this very rainy Friday. We're doing our part to keep office occupancy in Midtown as low as possible. So this is an important conference. I can't remember the last time I put on a suit on a Friday. But at least I didn't put on a tie. I see Ryan and Bruce did. So anyway, welcome to this. I think we have a great program today. You all have the agenda, and we're about to start. But I do want to give a couple of thoughts by way of introduction. First, before I forget, I've been asked to do this, and I don't trust myself to do it at the end, so I'm going to do it at the beginning, which is to remind you that there are sign-in sheets as you come in on that table. And I think they're even for each panel. Erica, is that correct? Each panel has a separate one. So sign in for the panels that you will actually attend. They have Paul Hastings on it, so you'll see one of our sponsors on it. Please sign in just for those. I don't know whether there's ethics credit being offered for this, but my view is that because of the system, they only sign in for each of the panels that you attend. If you don't sign in for all of the panels, you should automatically get ethics credit, because it means you are an ethical person. So try this, Eric. I don't know if it'll work, but that's my thought. I want to share two thoughts with you that I've been thinking a little bit about. These two centers that are co-sponsoring today's program are about the future of the corporation and governance. And you will hear quite a few panels today that will examine different aspects of it. But I've been thinking about two thoughts connected by recent events. You know, we did have an election recently, you may have noticed, and I do want to talk about something that involves the most powerful person in the world now. And of course, I am speaking about Elon Musk. And so the first thought is the question of political activism. Right? What role should that play in the life of a corporation? And you know, this has been a topic that we have been discussing for some number of years in different contexts. For those of you who are of a certain age, you may remember, and others of you have no doubt heard, a very famous story, probably the best articulation of whether companies or others who have a brand should get involved in political activism. And that involves Michael Jordan, right? And in 1990, there was a Senate race in the state of North Carolina where a gentleman by the name of Harvey Gantt, an African-American mayor of Charlotte, was running against this unreconstructed segregationist Jesse Helms. And Howard Gantt, or his campaign, asked Michael Jordan, then a major rising star and a very famous person, for an endorsement, which he refused. And many of you may have heard that the famous way in which he did so is by saying, when asked why not, he said, because Republicans buy sneakers too. And this articulation of kind of how either celebrities, sports figures, or corporations even should not be involved because there's a cost to being involved, I think was a fair description of how many corporations for many, many years thought about this question. And then at some point, it switched, right? I can't tell you what year precisely, but certainly by the start of the first Trump administration, it was already very different. You know, whether it's pressure from employees or customers and others, CEOs felt the need to say something, to put out a statement and the like, and sometimes that involved costs, as in the case, you know, boycotts with Disney and Starbucks and McDonald's and Bud Light and others. But they chose to do so and are continuing to do so, although there's some retrenchment, and I don't know if the activism panel will talk about this concept of green hushing, but there's this big kind of line of scrimmage out there as to how much companies should speak and what the cost is and whether they should bear it. But Elon Musk, you know, when you think about Elon, you know, nothing is like middle class. You know, I think every issue gets exaggerated, and so would this one. So when he bought Twitter in October 22, I remember asking myself, oh, that's interesting, because he immediately, even before he purchased it, he was speaking out ideologically on what he intended to use the platform for. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting, because he actually has some very different views, And they seem to be very politically charged, right? And of course, once he bought Twitter famously, he unlocked Donald Trump's account and made a lot of other statements. And I thought to myself, well, okay, if you're Twitter, he owns Twitter, right? So they can pay the price, and in other words, he's paying the price. But if you're a director of Tesla, for example, how are you thinking about what's going on at Twitter, and namely what Elon is doing? And of course, he basically established kind of a point of view. And when you thought about the customer base of Tesla in those years, only a couple of years ago, it wasn't the kind of people I thought that would gravitate towards the new Elon Musk or the Twitter. And recently, interestingly, I have a friend who teaches at the Yale School of Management who actually did a little bit of an analysis of that first year of ownership. And he looked at car sales, Tesla sales, and what he did was he wanted to see whether, because he noticed, by the way, a bunch of stickers around New Haven, Connecticut that said, I bought this car, before I knew Elon was crazy. I don't know if any of you have seen this sticker. And so that made them think, well, let me study car sales in various different jurisdictions. And what they did was they divided the country into threes, the most Democratic, the most Republican, and the ones in the middle. And they looked at what happened in the year 2023. So this is before the recent kind of political activism by Elon Musk. And what they found, and maybe it was predictable, is that the sales in the Democratic counties, the most Democratic counties, fell by 10 percentage points. The ones in the middle fell just by 1 or 2, and the Republican counties kind of went up. Now the problem, of course, for Tesla is that only 2.5% of their customers live in that Republican third, right? And 85% live in the Democratic third, the most Democratic. And while there are a lot more vehicles, EVs out there today because it's a more mature industry, so you would expect market share to go down over time. Kind of the middle category is probably more of a proxy for what's happening market-wide, right? And the other probably reflects some ideological choice being made. So car sales or market share at Tesla has drifted down, and their thesis was that it was due to this activism relating to Twitter. And it gave a caveat, which is important, which is this does not account for what has happened in the year since, right? Which is, I would say, far more dramatic, right? Because his involvement on behalf of the Trump campaign was a bigger gamble in some ways, and probably when this is studied, maybe I'll have some statistics next year, probably had an even bigger effect, okay? And I think that you have to ask yourself the question of whether, if you're a director sitting in the board of a company, or maybe if you're an activist or a shareholder, what are your thoughts when a company is doing something like this? And here there's a further interesting question that occurs to me, which is it's not even is it the company doing it, or is it not, right? Because Elon Musk owns something under 15% of Tesla. He's obviously the alter ego and the CEO and the famous personality, but company's not using its own resources, right? Elon Musk is doing stuff on his own. But he's so connected, a control shareholder in legal terms maybe, but so connected that people are reacting to his activism by taking it out on company sales, if you will. So we have, I don't know if she's in the room right now, but Vice Chancellor Will is here at this conference, and she actually authored maybe the most important opinion in this area. It was a books and records case relating to Disney, when Disney took a public position against the Florida law, that don't say gay law. There was someone who wanted to see the books and records of how the board came to the decision to do this, noting that it might be a breach of fiduciary duties. Now, she rejected this argument, basically concluding that this was a matter of business judgment, and the board met, deliberated, and made a reasonable choice, one that shouldn't be questioned by the courts, to do this because they have employees and customers, and they made a reasonable judgment. Now, I wonder what VCW would think, right, in a situation like this, where there was no board meeting, at least as far as I know. Maybe there was. I don't have the books and records. Does the board have an obligation to rein in a guy like Elon Musk, who's acting on his own time with his own resources? That's an interesting question. We think of this kind of question in other contexts, not just corporate contexts, but I think that that's, maybe we won't see a lot of this, but I do think Elon is putting this front and center, at least for me. The other, I'll do it very, very briefly, I wanted to talk about this idea of reincorporation out of Delaware, also generated in large part by Elon Musk being very public when he lost his, let's say, $56 billion payday his comp in a Delaware decision authored by the chancellor. He tweeted or X'd, whatever you call it now, don't ever incorporate in the in the state of Delaware. And of course that set off a very big frenzy. We spent a lot of time, we lawyers and others who are involved in this kind of thinking, spent a lot of time analyzing Delaware and the merits and all that stuff, and I'll come to that in a moment. What's the hoopla about? 60% of the S&P 500 is still in Delaware. If you look at the actual numbers of companies that have moved year in, year out of Delaware, we're talking about between 5 and 10 companies per year. This is not a large number. By the way, the number one state of large companies in America is Delaware. Does anybody know number two?
Nevada.
What?
Nevada. Maryland.
Not Nevada, Maryland. All right, who said Maryland? Okay. So he gets the second and third guesses. What's the third? Bruce,
Nevada.
what do you think the third is? Nevada?
Nevada.
No. Any other guesses? No, it's Ireland. Okay? No joke. So let's brush up on our Irish code. So we talk a lot about it. My own view of where this is heading is that, and by the way, our own Lena's here, and I have a couple other colleagues, Alex and Sam, and maybe I'm missing some. Our own senior partner, Marty Lipton, in the late 1980s, 1988, after the Interco, after the Pillsbury decision, actually wrote client memos suggesting that companies consider moving out of Delaware. So he joins in an ironic twist in this Elon Musk kind of perspective. Back then it was New Jersey and Ohio and Pennsylvania as the alternatives. And today it's Nevada and Texas, which are not providing except for control shareholders. So back then it was takeover and anti-takeover issues, and today it's the control shareholder. And there's a lot of, you're going to have a whole panel on that at this conference. So I'll leave it to that. But there's a lot of very interesting decisions that are being questioned, and control shareholders are pushing their companies to go reincorporate. I don't think this will be a big trend. State of Nevada and Texas, the current kind of go-to places, do not really have the judiciary, the expert judiciary, the case law, the volume of business to create predictable and reasonable laws over time. But I do just want to say one thing about speed, because I do think this is one of the most underappreciated facets of this, which is Delaware is very, very quick, right? Both on the judiciary side and on the legislative side. And judiciary side, we already know they expanded the court, and now case laws, there's 7 judges now in the Court of Chancery. They're all experts, and they may see up to 50 business cases per judge a year. That's more than the entire state of Nevada will see, or the state of Texas, depending on how you define business cases. There isn't a lot of law, and many of them look to Delaware anyway. But I will say, because it is somewhat controversial, and again, you'll hear about it a little bit today, but what happened this year, where there were 3 decisions, at least 3, I will say, Moelis, Activision, and Crispo, that a lot of practitioners immediately reacted, almost violently reacted against, and said, this is wrong, this is not the law, it shouldn't be the law. And so what happened? In the state of Delaware, and this was with remarkable speed, and which has been very controversial, and I'll leave it at that, the council, which is kind of the State Bar Association committee that proposes legislation, composed of experts that's really reasonably balanced between plaintiffs and corporate counsel, immediately swung into action and effectively, I won't summarize it, undid each of these 3 decisions. Very controversial among many quarters, including some people in this room. I won't discuss the merits, I won't take an opinion on the merits of that, but I will say that the fact that the Delaware legislature could, within, let's say, 4 months, have responded in this way is in many ways an important differentiator for the state of Delaware, especially when you consider that the legislature in Nevada and Texas meet every other year, right? So bad decisions have to happen kind of on a particular schedule in order to even be remedied with speed. And I think for deal makers like myself and others in this room, having things happen quickly, you could argue about whether they happen correctly or not, because I do think that there's an iterative process and Delaware gets to the right place because it's in their interest to, I think is a super important underappreciated strength of the state. And I will say just one last thought on this, that if Elon Musk thinks he got a bad deal in the state of Delaware, I will give you one other jurisdiction, which is arguably worse, and it's an easy target. But some of you may have seen this in general news. Russia has just recently a Russian court issued a verdict against Google for $20 decillion, not rubles, for their banning 17 different channels from YouTube, right? Those Russian propaganda channels. Now, 20 decillion, just for those of you who are like me, who didn't know what that number was, is 20 followed by 33 zeros, right? Which is far in excess not only of the 2 or 3 trillion, whatever Google's market cap is, but also the world's GDP many times over. And the way they arrived at this is there was like $1,000 a day, but if you didn't pay, it doubled, going back to 2020. So now it's 20 decillion, but if it's not paid in 9 months, it doubles again it's every day, I think. This one was every week, the one from 2020. So obviously, Elon Musk should be happy to be in Delaware and not complain so much because he could be in Russia. And anyway, I will leave my thoughts there and introduce just very briefly Dorothy Lund, who will then introduce the next panel. And Dorothy is a professor here at Columbia Law School, is a relatively recent 2023 hire, superstar hire, the future of the corporate brand here, hopefully, at Columbia Law School. She teaches M&A corporations and law and economics, and most importantly, she was a clerk of Leo Strine and some other person on the 7th Circuit, doesn't matter, Leo Strine. So I will leave it there for the next panel, but thank you very much, and thank you for attending this panel.